Hello grade 10th, I hope all of you are doing fine. After the storm, I think we got disconnected a bit. So of course, I hope you all are doing fine right now. So we have completed, and will be sending you a list so that you can do your check. So today we will be starting off with another part, another physiological process in our body known as excretion. Now, what is excretion? Now, let me tell you that there is a big difference between excretion and egestion. Egestion is a part of digestion. Nutrition, you had already studied that there are 5 parts. So, egestion is throwing out of the undigested food from the anus. But what about excretion? Now, excretion is also removal. So removal of nitrogenous wastes from our body is known as excretion. Now, what are the nitrogenous wastes that are produced in our body? Basically, we are ureotelic animals. That means our basic excretory product is urea. Other than urea, there are other nitrogenous wastes that has to be thrown out of my body. They are uric acid, ammonia, and so on. But we basically, being human beings, we throw out urea as the most primary excretory product of our body. So the elimination of these nitrogenous products from the body is known as excretion. And why does it need to be removed? Because if we do not remove these waste materials, they will get accumulated in our body, and as a result of which it will cause toxicity level in our bodies to increase. So where are these wastes produced from? These wastes don't come from outside, right? Yes, it is produced in our body only. How? By the different metabolic activities that we undergo. Different physiological activities are going inside my body. Those metabolic activities actually contribute to these kind of waste generation which has nitrogen as their base. So to avoid the accumulation of these nitrogenous wastes which are lethal, which can be harmful, which can cause death, so we have to eliminate these wastes from the body. So the removal of these wastes by the process of excretion is done in human beings by the excretory system. Now you need to take a look at the note. Now the excretory system in human beings, the primary organ of excretory system in human beings is the kidneys. Now you see the kidneys are over here. Now the kidneys are linked to a pipe-like structure or a tube-like structure that is coming out of the kidney, and this is known as the ureter. Now ureter is coming and getting deposited in a bladder-like structure or a sac-like structure called the urinary bladder, and from the urinary bladder through an opening called urethra, the urine is coming out, and this process in which the urine comes out is known as micturition. So what does it consist of then, excretory system? It consists of a pair of kidneys, a urinary bladder, a pair of ureter and urethra. Now what is kidney? Now kidney is the prime organ by which excretion takes place. Now kidney is known as the strainer of my body. Like when we make tea, what happens? We take in the tea leaves, put it in water, make the tea. Now I need to strain the tea off. So I use a strainer. So the kidney is the strainer of my body. So these kidneys, they are the bean-shaped organ which actually lies at the back of our body, just adjacent to the vertebral column in the abdominal cavity. And this kidney is made up of millions of nephrons. And nephrons are the filtering units of my body. So if they ask you what is the structural and functional unit of excretory system, you have to say it is nephrons. So nephron is the structural and functional unit of kidney. Now let's go to how the nephrons look like. As I have already told you how nephrons are the filtering units of my body, of my kidney. So basically the nephron consists of a cup-like structure called the Bowman's capsule. In this cup-like structure, you see there is something inside. This is nothing but the blood vessels that are there, the capillaries that are there. So this, bunch of capillaries inside this Bowman's capsule is known as the glomerulus. From here starts a convolution, and this is known as the proximal convoluted tubule. Then over here, after the convolution is done, comes a U-shaped structure called the loop of Henle, and finally again a convolution, because it is away from this, it is known as distal convoluted tubule. Proximal mane near and distal mane far. So proximal convoluted tubule is just after the Bowman's capsule, and distal convoluted tubule is after the loop of Henle, and finally in the collecting duct it ends up or terminates. These collecting ducts that are there, that will finally join with what? Join with the different collecting ducts of the different nephrons. Now this is just one nephron, and I have told you kidney has billions of nephrons. So these collecting ducts, they will join together to form the ureter, and finally the ureter will go to the urinary bladder. Now as you can see in this glomerulus, there I was talking about this capillaries that are there. So basically there is the renal artery that comes in. The renal artery that comes in breaks into two, afferent arteriole and efferent arteriole. Afferent arteriole brings in blood, and efferent arteriole collects the blood and takes it out. Now my point is, as you can see the structural difference, the afferent arteriole is thicker and the efferent arteriole is thinner. So you can well imagine that we have already studied in physics that pressure is inversely proportional to the area of cross section. So you see that the area of cross section over here is less, so the pressure exerted over here is more. So this pressure will be instrumental in the formation of the urine. So now we are going to study about the formation of urine that takes place in these nephrons. So basically there are three steps to urine formation: glomerular filtration or ultrafiltration, tubular reabsorption, and secretion. Tubular reabsorption is also known as selective reabsorption. So let's go in one by one. So first you have to know very importantly that the urine that is produced is always from the blood. Now in this, the first step in the ultrafiltration, what happens? The blood comes over here, and what happens is it is poured over here, and as I told you, there is high pressure over here. So what happens due to this high pressure? All the nitrogenous waste, glucose, water, amino acid from the blood, it is filtered in this Bowman's capsule of the nephron and sent back to the body, and rest of the materials of the blood starts flowing down from here to here to the proximal convoluted tubule. Now once the blood is no more known as the blood, it is known as the glomerular filtrate. When the glomerular filtrate reaches the proximal convoluted tubule, it is at this part that the necessary other things which is required by my body has to be reabsorbed back from that filtrate, like glucose, like sodium salts, sodium ions, chloride ions, that needs to be taken in back to my body. That is why it is known as tubular reabsorption or selective reabsorption. Why? Because I'm selecting what is required by my body, sending back to my body, and sending the rest of it to the loop of Henle, and finally loop of Henle mein the selective reabsorption is over. Now comes to the distal convoluted tubule. In the distal convoluted tubule, whatever extra water, salts, which is not required by my body, especially potassium salt, creatinine, urea, whatever else is there, now will come from the body into that filtrate so that it is thrown out of my body in the proximal convoluted tubule, and finally it will go to the collecting duct as the urine. Now I can call it urine after the tubular secretion has taken place. Now urine obviously has been produced. The collecting duct, which will join to form the ureter, will now carry the urine to the urinary bladder. Now you have to understand one thing, that urinary bladder has to be guarded. Why? Because if I am supposed to make urine every time, I am not throwing out urine every minute. So there is a sphincter muscles which actually prevent the urinary bladder from opening up every time. So the urethra is guarded by a sphincter muscle which actually helps to store the urine in the urinary bladder, and this urinary bladder gets completely full. Once it gets completely full, then there is a pressure which opens up the sphincter muscles, and that sphincter muscle, which is actually over here, throws out the urine once the pressure is given from the urinary bladder, and urethra, through urethra, this urine is thrown out of my body, and this process is known as micturition. So this completes our human excretory system. Now sometimes what happens, these kidney might not function. So that at that point of time, what I need to do is a process called hemodialysis. This is purifying blood like a kidney does, but by a artificial kidney. So it is meant for kidney failure patients who need to undergo dialysis. And last, so not only plants, animals excrete, plants also need the urge to excrete out their waste products. What are their waste products? Oxygen, carbon dioxide, water. It will be thrown out by the stomata through transpiration, and transpiration means that the removal of excess water in the form of water vapor through the aerial parts of the plant. There are other waste products also. So basically they are stored in leaves and bark, and whenever these leaves become yellow and fall off, then that waste material is also excreted. Plants excrete some waste into the soil also. There are some gums and resin, the gums that we use, the latex that we use, that comes from the older xylems of the bark of the plant. So gums and resins are stored in the older xylem, which becomes gums and is excreted out. And some metabolic products can be stored at crystals in the form of calcium oxalates, and you can find them in colocasia. Colocasia is kochu, and zamikand, that is mankochu, right? So colocasia and zamikand, you will find small crystals that are there. That is how plants excrete out materials into outside their body. So with this, we complete the excretion, the physiological process of excretion. I hope you've understood. If you haven't, kindly mention it under the video. I will be happy to answer you back.